got a great film to play, just
Hello?
Have you ever snogged a lady?
We had a technical problem.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on there.
Can I swear? Shit!
Welcome to Crunch and Roll, a podcast about the side of the radio industry that most people never hear about, featuring some of its most interesting characters. My name is John Fox, East Hull Kabaddi champion, considerate lover, and, most pertinently for this podcast, a former radio presenter. Applied my trade on breakfast shows in Hull, in Reading, Stoke, and Birmingham, on both commercial stations and the BBC. So, I reckon I'm qualified to ask my guests the questions we're all dying to hear the answers to. Now, we've had some proper radio anoraks on the podcast in the past, but my guest today might just trump them all. He begins our chat by showing us various parts of studios that he's liberated from places he's worked at over the years. John Foster also has an incredible memory for the details. Radio station addresses, straplines, even the exact spec of his branded car, which is really quite useful for a podcast interview about his career. He chats about the excitement of his early career, also the tougher times towards the end, and also an incredible wedding gift from former Crunch and Roll guest Alex Lester. Before we start, just our regular reminder that if you do enjoy this podcast and you would like to support us, then we would love you just a tiny bit more. Just head to Ko-fi. Just go to ko-fi.com/crunch and roll. Exactly what our latest backers, Richard Moore and Robin Blameras, have done. Thank you so much. Should we crunch and roll? Oh, yeah. John, how are you?
I am okay. A little bit daunted. Full of trepidation. Let's see what happens.
Why are you full of trepidation?
Well, talking about yourself is something that a lot of radio people seriously want to do, but have never really done before. So you always, and having heard other episodes of this and contributed as well, by the way, you just think, am I really that interesting to warrant a podcast about me? But, I suppose if it's crap, it'll be the shortest podcast ever on Crunch and Roll. And if it's okay, well, it'll be okay.
Well, John Foster, thank you very much for being on Crunch and Roll. It's been absolutely, it's been wonderful. Now, let's carry on. Can I just...
Good night. All the best. And away we go.
Can I just say, if I know little about the guest I'm going to speak to, or if I've not met, I often reach out to people that do know the guest, and I've done that for you.
Right.
Now...
Okay.
Would you? I mean, we've had some real anoraks on Crunch and Roll. I mean, I'm talking full on anoraks. But look, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I'm going to put you in the top 5 in the country when it comes to radio anoraks. Would you agree with that?
Ooh, I'd like to think I was somewhere in the top 10, but certainly not in the top 5. I just love it. And whoever you've spoken to, obviously have a handle on me being a bit of an anorak and liking things like jingles and knowing that it's 5454 Parkdale Drive, Dallas, Texas for Jam Creative Productions. And I've been there and all of that sort of stuff. But there's one person on the podcast who I don't want to mention, if that's okay. Can we just get that clear straight away? And that's Hursty. Because every podcast that Hursty's done never mentioned me. She's never, ever mentioned me. And we speak daily, literally daily. 2 or 3 times a day, and she's never ever mentioned me. So I refuse to mention Hursty on this podcast.
Well, I'll admit that she may be one of the moles. Maybe. Is it true?
That's why she rang me earlier on today and said, "So how was it?" I said, "How was what?" I said, "Crunch and Roll." I said, "It's tonight." Oh,
is it true that you've got a rented container full of radio merchandise?
No,
no,
it's not rented. I own it. It's called the garage.
Okay,
and this is where we are now, above my garage in Halifax in West Yorkshire, and I've got a fully blown studio with proper woodwork from a radio station from the old Pulse in Foster Square in Bradford when they moved out. Tony McKenzie, who's the boss, yeah, you can have the key. Just get whatever you want. So me and the person who won't be mentioned on this podcast, Hursty, rented a transit van. And we just went down and picked everything. We picked Foster Square clean of everything. And I think she's got the majority of it, but I've got the stuff that actually still works. And in here, yeah, I mean, I've got mixers, I've got books, like this, which is the 1975 Radio Tees mugshot book for reception, which has Les Ross in it and people like Bob Hopton, of course, who was at BRMB, Brian Anderson, John Bradford, Chaz Kennedy, who set up Capital Radio. I've got the on-off button from the old Radio Tees desk, the Alice from 1975. Listen. There it is. So you could say I have got one or two bits and pieces here and stuff that's just like fallen into my possession. Master jingle packages from Metro Radio, from TFM, from Alpha Sound, you name it, it's all here. I've been showing them to John on the camera for people listening.
And John is overly impressed. That is absolutely incredible. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now let's go right back to the start. Whereabouts are you from then, John?
I'm from the northeast of England. I'm from a town called Middlesbrough. And I got into radio about 12, 13 years of age. And that's when it started. I'd been aware of the radio, obviously, but for my birthday, my parents got me a clock radio. And it must have been like one of these Del Boy ones with the amazingly bright red LED for the time. Medium wave, long wave, and VHF. That's how old it was. And I started listening on the night. I couldn't get to sleep because the display was that bright, so I started listening. And I started listening to Radio Tees, and that's the thing where I just thought, wow, this sounds great. These people are fantastic. Ooh, this looks like a good job. So that's how it started.
So it was from that moment there then, John, that you decided that you wanted to be on air, was it?
I thought it could be good. There was a guy on doing the evening program on Radio Tees. The evening program was called Street Level, and it was a guy called Roger Lewis who went on to run Classic FM and Radio 1 and the Welsh Rugby Union, ITV Wales, Decca Records and all of that sort of stuff. And he was doing it. I thought, that sounds great. And he was doing competitions and he was interviewing the pop stars of the day, Duran Duran and all of that. And I thought, that sounds pretty good. Then this guy came on after him called Graham Robb, very successful businessman in the Northeast now, with all of these characters. And he had a car with his name on the side. And I thought, wow, that sounds good. And I tuned in the next morning. John Simons was doing breakfast. Alex Lester, who's been on the podcast, Grandad, as he's affectionately known. He was on, Paul Robinson. I mean, it was a great lineup that I was listening to. And I just thought, that sounds pretty good. I would love to do that. And I went down to the studios in time, and I actually met Alex Lester. The first official meeting between me and Alex was in Binns in Darlington, and he signed his presenter postcard to me. But I first met him in reception at Radio Tees. I was getting a car sticker or buying a pen or something like that for 25p. And he came wandering around with a cart in his hand and said, "Oh, be looking for this," and disappeared into the studio. I just looked through the glass and I thought, wow, I want to do that. That's brilliant. And he had a car with his name on the side as well. The North's top DJ, Alex Lester.
Just whilst we're on the subject of Alex Lester, and this is fast forwarding quite a few years, but is it true that he bought you a wheelbarrow for your wedding present?
Yes. It's downstairs in the garage. We still have it. We still have it, yes. Which was, people looked at it and said, "What's he got your wheelbarrow for?" But it was brilliant because we put all of our other wedding presents in the wheelbarrow and took them up to our room. So it was pretty useful from the word go. But yeah, I mean, I got to know Alex, and he's just a fabulous guy. I mean, what a talent, what a radio talent, and that overnight program on Radio 2, and what he's doing now on Greatest Hits as well. But that overnight program on 2. I mean, he gave, let's be honest here, if you did breakfast during that time, you listened to Alex and there's certain things that you got and ideas and maybe embellished them a little bit and you put them on your show. He was brilliant for content.
Let's go to where you started then. So you got in at Hospital Radio. Where was that?
It was South Cleveland Hospital Radio. This is Channel 1. It's now James Cook University Hospital on Martin Road in Middlesbrough. Mark Dennison was on Hospital Radio with me. Yeah. And he was just leaving to go off to university in Nottingham. He's a couple of years older. And there's a guy called Dave Roberts who worked at Sky and ran their bureau out in Singapore, and a very respected commentator. He was on there as well. And that's where I started, and then decided I would love to get into a proper station. So I wrote to Radio Tees, and they very kindly wrote back and said, "Bugger off." So I didn't get in there, but I got in at the BBC, in at Radio Cleveland, and went and shadowed on the sports programme and then got a job on the sports program where we were paid £4 an afternoon.
Wow.
And that was a great learning curve, because the guy who ran the sports department then was a guy called John Allard, and he was just brilliant. He was absolutely fantastic for little bits of craft, little bits of, technique that years later you find yourself still using because it works. And because he had been a paper journalist as well, he knew how to craft a sentence. He knew how to make the words stand out in the queue. So, just by observing people, it was a real education. And of course, as every Anorak, I went in and dubbed the jingles straight off onto cassette, and went in every school holiday and basically bugged the life out of people. But it was brilliant, and we had so much fun there. So I used to answer the phones on the competitions, and then I learned how to use the old Mark III desk, and just driving various different programs. And like on the sports program, you've got like 6 outside sources and they're coming in left, right and center. And I got fairly good at doing that. So I used to drive all the big programs on the BBC. And there was so many characters there as well who were still on the air. Some people who'd been there since day one. And it was the proper, it's lunchtime, right, we're going to the pub, disappear off to the pub for an hour, couple of pints, and everybody would wander back in the middle of the afternoon and pick up the stories for the rest of the day.
Well, we all know
it was great.
We all know what the BBC's like now, but what was the BBC like back then?
It was great. I mean, at Radio Cleveland, there were various characters. There was a studio called the NCA, which locked from the inside, rather bizarrely, and had an open mic to London, to Broadcasting House, to Central Control Room. And funnily enough, lots of people used to go in there and lock the door and unplug the microphones. And I don't know why they were doing that, but maybe trying to gain access to Dixon's for some reason. I don't know. But there was a guy who did a Saturday morning program. The studios were all in the line. So there would be they were called cubicles. The studios that had the equipment in the desk were cubicles, and the talk studios were known as studios. So there's cubicle 1B, studio 1, cubicle 1A. And the guy on the air presenting from cubicle 1A one day, he used to play his records and his tapes in and his cards, but he had somebody driving him in 1B. This was the 80s and the BBC. And I was doing that one day, and we had to drive in the outside sources and the news and all of that sort of stuff. And a couple of times I cocked it up. And then all of a sudden my ears clicked on talkback, and he came through and he said, "If you ever do anything like that again, I'm going to come through there and kick your ass." And he was kidding. And I just looked down and I said, "Oh, piss off," or something like that. And then the talkback furiously clicking in my ear like that. And I looked round and he started gesticulating at me, left, right and centre. What he failed to realise was there was a scout group in Studio 1 having a Studio 2, and they were just looking at him open-mouthed. What's going on here? So, it was full of those sort of characters. We used to have to do the tape change. 4 hours of sport in the afternoon on BBC Radio Cleveland on Saturday was, on the run-up to it, the hour before, was a program called House Call, which was listeners' poetry and music in the lighter style. Before 4 hours of sport. I mean, fantastic programming. But it required a tape change halfway through, because it was in stereo, 15 IPS, reel-to-reel machine, 2 tapes. And it was up to sport to do the tape change. And of course, we were all farting around in the studios and we missed it. We constantly missed this tape change. And then one day the XD was ringing. We thought it was somebody from one of the football grounds picked up and went, "Hello." And he said, "Hello, it's Frank Cookie, the MP for Stockton North," on the XD. He said, "You're off the air?" And we looked around, there's this tape whizzing around on the backstop. And we put the next reel on, and no word of a lie, after 4 minutes of silence, it started with the presenter's voice going, "Norrie Paramore there and his orchestra with a wonderful song called so-and-so. You're listening to House Call." We're like, bollocks. We've dropped a real clanger here. Because we just wanted to just fart on in studios, left, right and centre. But it was great. Really, really loved it. What an education. What an education that they gave me without them knowing, because I just used to go in and absorb everything off them.
It was a technical problem. You heard something on air you shouldn't have done.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about your first presenting gig. In 1990, you go to TFM, which, we've had a few guests on Crunch and Roll that talk about happy times at TFM. A special radio station, wasn't it?
It was, and when I wanted to do it, and when I wanted to be on the radio, it was TFM. It was Radio T's, and then obviously it became TFM. And you get to that point, we've done a bit of hospital radio, working at the BBC, you start sending your demos out. And I was sending demos out left, right, and centre. I've still got the rejection letters in the file behind me. And I sent one to TFM, and Nick Piercy got back in touch with me. He was the chief presenter. And of course, Nick was on Heart in the West Midlands for a lot of years, all over the shop. It's a good tape. Try doing it like this. Keep working at it. Send it back in 6 months' time. 6 months later, send him another tape. Great. Can you come in and do an As Live demo? And I was like, so we fixed up the date, and I went into the studios on Dovecot Street. And that place is amazing. Even now, if I go back to Stockton, I will go down Dovecot Street. I'll make a beeline and go down the road just to see if the building's still there, which of course it is. But it had a smell all of its own. It was electric inside. And here's this building that I wanted to work at, and all of a sudden the door was opening for me. I couldn't believe it. I did the live demo and didn't hear anything for about a month. And then it was the World Cup 1990. Gaza was crying. And the phone rang at home in Middlesbrough, and it was Brian Lister, the PD. And he said, "We like your tape. We want to offer you a short-term contract. See how you shape up. Saturday night, 7 till 10, beginning in a couple of months' time. What do you think?" I was like, yeah. So the 6th of October, 1990 is when I sat in that studio where all my idols had sat. And I was about to take charge of this great big transmitter at Billsdale that beamed out of the whole of the northeast of England. And I was on, All Hits All Day, TFM. 9660, the music force in North Yorkshire in the northeast. And seriously, I was, it was almost like I can't put it into words what it felt like. It was just amazing.
So how long did you spend at TFM?
3 months.
Did you 3 months? Not the 6 months.
No, not the 6 months. 3 months, because I think I was 18 and I got the gig, and I think I was cock of the north. And really, in hindsight, I was trying to do too much before I got the basics. And it taught me a very valuable lesson. So I went away, licked my wounds. I did AA Road Watch. That's my name. This is where I work, which was great for networking across all the stations. And then about a year later, I sent another tape to TFM back, and they said, "Yeah, okay, fair enough. We like it still. Come on in." And they give me Sunday afternoons. And this time I played it right by the book. And I did everything that was asked of me. Didn't try to bend the rules. I stayed well within the rules. And I did that for, the best part of 1992. And I was living in Leeds at the time. And on the station, there was Nick Wright, Nick Piercy, Phil White, Leslie Gunn, John Kane, and various other people as well. And again, it was great. And it moved to the new building. So I was in that building, and it was fantastic. And I still used to go back to the old building, which was still, had all the old studios in it, because they had a security man in it for about 18 months after they'd left. So I used to go in and walk around, and it was great. And I really enjoyed it. And then they hired Mark Dennison. Deno came back up from Nottingham, where he'd been at university. They had 5 shows a week for him. His 6th show was my Sunday show. So I left again. But what Brian did, and I'm eternally grateful to Brian, I think he got on the phone and he said, "Look," he said, "this is what's happening here. Give Paul Fairburn a ring at Air FM. He's expecting your call. Maybe try Steve King at Hallam. You're in Leeds and Leeds Sheffield, that's okay. Humberside's maybe a bit over there, out the way. Maybe a bit hard for you to get to, because I'd recently just learned to drive and get a car. So I got in touch with Fairburn and ended up doing some gigs at Air FM, where I met Hursty, and Richard James was on the air, Carl Kingston. It was Magic 828, Roger Kirk, and people like that. And it's Impression FM, and all of those sort of people. So I did a bit of depth there. I did a bit of depth for Francis Curry at Minster. And then I sent a tape, not to Steve King at Hallam, but I sent one to Dean Pepple at Great Yorkshire Radio, who was the PD. And I got some gigs on Great Yorkshire Radio. So I was 20 years old, and I was on an oldie station, beaming out across most of Yorkshire on medium wave.
Because you were, when you were on Great Yorkshire Radio, you were the youngest jock on a gold station in the whole of the United Kingdom, weren't you?
I think I was, yeah. I think I was 20 years of age, playing Buddy Holly, Adam Faith, What Do You Want, 1 minute 31 ends, and 7-second intro. And I did a few gigs on that, and bizarrely, Paul Fairbairn wouldn't let me call myself John Foster on the air, so I had to be called something else, and I picked on the name Coleman, John Coleman. So for the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, month, whatever, on Great Yorkshire Radio, I was John Coleman. And then Dean took me aside and he said, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Because Paul Fairbairn at air." He said, "Oh, balls to that." He said, "Call yourself your normal name." And then the next night I went on as John Foster and everybody was ringing up saying, "Who's this new presenter? Who have you come from?" I said, "I've been here the last 3 weeks." And then what happened was Colin Slade left, there was a move around, and I got the Late Show full time. Steve Parkinson then comes in. What a guy. What a guy. Rebranded it to Great Yorkshire Gold. I've still got the coffee mug, and that's what a station that was when that got up and running. My God, was that brilliant.
What was so good about it, John?
It was good for me because I was 21 years of age. I was on early breakfast. FM was very cutthroat in those days, or it seemed to me to be very cutthroat. Everybody were treading on each other just to get their bit of fame. Mark Jones was doing breakfast. Jonesy had been at Radio City for about 100 years. He'd been there, done it, seen it, worn the T-shirt, made the T-shirt. Steve Coleman had been at Metro, and I knew Steve from those days. Not personally, but I used to listen to him. And he'd been there, done it, seen it, worn the T-shirt, everything. So they were brilliant with me every day because, again, observing them, and they would tell me, "Do it like this, change that around. That's great. I heard that this morning, really good." So I learnt so much from them about technique and stuff like that. Parky was brilliant, man management, just fantastic, the way he got that station up. And it became a battle between AM and the FMs, both the Pulse and also Viking in East Yorkshire. Obviously, you know Viking. And Hallam, very definitely in the building. It was all-out war between both stations. And I was just sat in the middle of it, and it was just brilliant. Everybody was just fighting each other. At Great Yorkshire Gold in Hallam, a couple of the Hallam guys had their sponsored cars. Now, if you've ever been to Hallam, you turn off Herries Road and you go up Ward's End Road, and then it's a sharp right into the car park. And there's a row of car parking spaces. And the FM guys used to vie for which one could park their car in the first space. So as you turned in, that was the first thing you saw, their sponsored car. And they used to fight about who was going to park there. And then we had this Great Yorkshire Gold Torano Gold Runner, great big 4x4 Nissan. So what we used to do, just to wind everybody up, is we used to park in that space and then hide the key and it go missing. And then the guys would turn up at FM and they'd be having a fight with us and then having a fight with each other about who's parked there. My car needs to be seen first. And it's like, oh, bollocks, I think Steve Fountain's taking the key home. What a shame, eh? To you. And it was things like that. Who was on in reception? Again, there used to be a fight about who was on in reception, and it used to flip-flop, but there was one guy on FM who insisted it was him. And he used to go around and change all the radios in the building and in the racks room to FM. So I would go up towards the kitchen, get myself a coffee, and I'd change everything to AM. And one day, he followed me up and changed them all to FM. So Jonesy went up and changed them all to AM, and he went up again and got another coffee. By 20 minutes into his show, this guy had about 10 cups of coffee lined up because all of us from AM had just gone up and changed the radios, and he'd followed us. And it was like that all the way through. It was brilliant.
I've never known competition between FM and AM before.
Oh, it was utterly rife at Hallam. I mean, the Pulse were more on our side because Steve Martin had been in charge and he looked after Great North Radio. So he knew about AMs and FMs. And Viking was over there. We didn't really have much to do with Viking, to be honest with you, even though we were on 1161. But it was great, but an education for me. But having those people around me, Jerry Kersey, an institution in South Yorkshire, was brilliant. But Simon Dennis, Steve's assistant, was great. But Steve Parkinson, what a manager! What an absolute brilliant guy.
Let's talk about Sun City. So. In 95, you go to Sun City.
103.4, Sunderland's better music mix.
Do you know what, John? I've written down here memory, because your memory is just, I mean, it's not just the taglines, it's the street names. You must irritate your wife when you're arguing so much, because you don't forget a thing.
39 Homeside, SR1, 5, something. Yeah, no.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got let go at Great Yorkshire Gold, which was hard, but, you know, in hindsight, you understand the reasons why. And I ended up getting a job at Sun City. It was the old Weir FM. Minster Group had bought it, and they were going to try the GWR format. So we had people like Dick Stone and Rob Wagstaff used to come up and visit us from Group with the latest thinking, and just to make sure we were okay. And we did the format, the better music mix, all the Greg Marston VOs, which, you know, in the Northeast had never, ever been heard. And we were up against Metro. I mean, talk about David and Goliath. We literally had no money at all. We didn't have 2 pennies to scrape our backsides with. But we did this format, and it worked. And we were very hometown proud. I was on there. There was a couple of other people on there. Guy Mowbray, now BBC One Match of the Day football commentator. He did our sports news, because it was all from Minster. So he used to appear on the line at 25 past. We used to have a good moan to each other, and then he'd do 90 seconds of sport, and then we used to have another 15 minutes moaning. And that was good. And that taught me a lot about radio. I mean, like I say, such a shoestring. I used to bring the bog roll in from home. I used to buy the bog roll for the radio station. And I used to take all like the tea towels and everything home and wash them. I mean, you know, talk about living the dream, hot jock on the block, 25 years of age. What am I doing? I'm washing and buying bog roll for a radio station. Unbelievable. But it was good fun. And we did lots of interesting little things which made its mark. And for me, personally, in the area, it was great, because out of that, I, you know, managed to be the stadium announcer at Sunderland Football Club for 18 years. So there was lots of spin-offs that came from it, which was great. But it was hard work. I think the 18 months I spent there was probably the hardest I'd ever worked in my life.
There is something quite nice about being the underdog, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and, you know, I always remember Rob Wagstaff, hello, matey, and he said, the thing is, he said, you can't take Metro on. He said, don't even think about taking Metro on, because if you do, they will kill you, you know, because they'll just come up with this great big competition. They'll be giving away holidays. You can't compete with that. So don't even try it. So go very hometown proud, talk about the area, talk about places, place names, streets, the lot. Do your competitions where you can. Build up that, you know, listener trust. And he was absolutely right. And in the first book in the Sunderland area, we were about 30,000 behind Metro from a standing start.
Amazing.
So, you know, we'd done it, and it was the better music mix. We all came on the air and went, Sun City, 103.4, Sunderland's better music mix. And I remember Dick Stone go, what the bloody hell are you doing, mate? I said, Sun City, 103.4, Sunderland's better music. He went, no, Sun City, better music mix. And again, it's little things like that that have stayed with me throughout the entire course of my career, that if something is better, it's better. You know, it's little bits of craft like that. I know it sounds very anal and stuff like that, but I really look out for stuff like that when I listen to the radio. And it's because people like Dick and Rob said to me, that's how you do it. That's how we want it.
It's worth pointing out that you were the launch breakfast jock on Sun as well.
I was, and the microphone hadn't been set up properly. The desk hadn't been set up, and it was all out of phase. So the only person who heard the first link on Sun City 103.4 was me in the studio. No one else heard it. They just heard this white noise.
Was it a good one?
It was brilliant. Sun City 103.4, Sunderland's better music mix. The big switch is on in Pallion, Hendon, and Monk Wearmouth. And I think that was it. It was the speed break after song 2 into 3.
You later go on to be the PD as well. I mean, was management on your radar? No,
and I was crap at it. I was absolutely crap at it because, you know, why did I do it? Because I was asked. Why did I do it? Because I was asked, because they were going to give me a bit more money. And I think, you know, ultimately that's the reason why I took the job. And I was doing breakfast, had all sorts of things on, and lots of things on in personal life and stuff like that. And I just took my eye off the ball. But, you know, you try and do your best. I always tried to do the best for the team. And Ed James was on the team as well. Eddie Stirk, as he was known. Ed James, He was at Sunderland University, so he used to do 6 till midnight.
Wow,
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. And, when you used to go for a contract renewal with John Darch, who ran Minster, I mean, John obviously kept an eye on the pennies, but bloody hell was he tight. And, I managed to get like an extra 30 pence out of him for Ed's wage. So little victories like that, as Norman Stanley Fletcher would say, little victories. That's what happens.
Can we talk about being the stadium announcer for Sunderland? Because I like talking to any Crunch and Roll guest who's done the football thing, because I did it at Hull City, which is my team and my hometown. And I'd supported the team for years, ever since I fell in love with football. I'd never been one of these, let's support Leeds because they're a bigger team, or Liverpool. I'm from Hull, I support Hull. And they offered us the opportunity to go on the pitch at Boothby Park.
Oh, wow.
And it was an absolute dream come true. So I walk onto the pitch, and then 3,000 people, which was the crowd that they used to get at that time, all started singing "You Fat Bastard," and it just killed that magical moment, John. I mean, have you got any stories of such a long time at Sunderland as well?
I'm the stadium announcer at Middlesbrough now as well. So
I want to get onto that, but yeah.
But I remember Sunderland going to Roker Park. I remember dressing up as a rabbit, Sonny the Sun City Bunny, and running around and getting chased by their mascot, the club's mascot, which is a cat. So the cat was chasing the rabbit around the touchline, and bloody hell is it hot in one of those suits. I remember going on the pitch at half-time to do the lottery draw with a guy called Bill Mantle, who's lovely. And it was Sunderland against Spurs, and Sunderland were 4-0 down, and had been 4-0 down after 18 minutes or something like that. And I'm stepping onto the pitch at Roker Park at half-time to the shouts of, "Fuck off! We're not interested! Give us a rest! You shite, by the way! Go on! Fuck off!" And first ticket out tonight. And I was, you just think, it's not my fault. Please don't take it out of me. But, you have things like that to put up with. But then, when you can reduce grown men to tears, when it was the very last game at Roker Park, we played across the PA as everybody was leaving, and everybody's standing there, the last game at Roker Park, this very iconic, famous stadium. We played Ella Fitzgerald every time we say goodbye, and Van Morrison on days like these. And there's like grown men. And as soon as this song, I remember looking at him, Ella Fitzgerald, and every time we say goodbye, he burst into tears. And you think, God, this is great, So to have an effect on people like that is quite amazing too.
Cunty.
We apologise, sir.
We just play records till 8, 9. When do we finish?
I'm not drunk. I've had a couple of drinks. I'm not drunk. Oh, yeah.
Let's move on from Sun. So where do you go next then, John?
I'd been at Sun for about 18 months, and I'd had a really good time. I was knackered, and they were changing. There was new owners coming in, and I'd had not a run-in with these new owners, but I thought, all right, okay, if this really does happen, I'm going to be first out. So I sent a tape to Great North Radio, because I'd heard there might be an opening coming up there. I didn't want to go to Metro. In hindsight, maybe I should have opted for Metro. But I went to Great North Radio, and I worked with a guy called Jim Brown. And I went in to do afternoons, and then all of a sudden Jim rang me up one day, and he said, "Hello, could you talk like that? Hello, John, I'm putting you on breakfast." I said, "Really?" He went, "Yes, I think you'd be great. Great at it." Bill Young was on the station, John Warwick was on the station, Adrian John. And I went and did Great North Radio breakfast in the Metro building. And again, Jim Brown, people who know Jim and have worked at Metro know the name. What an amazing guy. The most surreal radio station I've ever worked at. It was programmed to be like a gay disco. And Jim would regularly go through the music, and he'd go, "Oh, I'm not sure about this song." And it was the Gibson Brothers, Cuba. I said, "They're playing all the big gay discos, Jim. Level 1. Put it on level 1 and select it. Let's have a high rotation. Erasure? Not sure." I mean, what other oldie station used to play on a regular basis? Patrick Juvet, "I Love America," for God's sake. I mean, a massive gay anthem in Sylvester, but it was on Great North Radio. And I remember one morning I'd slept in, and I used to live about 40 miles away from Swalwell in Gateshead. And I'd slept in, and it was nip and tuck whether I was going to be there. And I rang Mark Thorburn, who did breakfast on Metro, and I said, "Look," I think I'm going to be late here. And he said, don't worry, we'll come out the night shift, we'll go into the news, and then after the news, we won't do any jingles. I'll just play the first song. And it's nothing that's going to sound outrageous on Great North Radio. So don't worry about it. He said, I said, I'd be in about 4 minutes past 6. I got in at 4 minutes past 6, ran up the stairs, and there was Jim stood at the bottom of the corridor. What the bloody hell time do you call this? He shouted at me. My office, 10 o'clock. And I walked in, and I was absolutely bricking it. And he said, do you know what an alarm clock is, John? And I went, I do, Jim. He said, would you like me to get yours fixed? But he was just the most bizarre boss, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant on an OB or anything like that. He was absolutely fantastic at getting the best out of you on the air. And then he moved on, and John O'Hara became my boss.
John O'Hara, yeah.
He was there. He was doing the changeover from Great North Radio to Magic. He'd been sent up because he'd just done it in Sheffield. And again, you know, presenter meeting with John O'Hara, a one-to-one Snoop session. You know, I used to come off the air at 10, and he used to shout from his office, faster, get in here, you little twat. And I'd go wandering, and he'd say, shut that door. Bang, and I'd slam the door for effect. And he'd sit down, he said, been listening to this radio station. God, that guy in the morning, what a fucking prick he is. Anyway, go home, great show. And that was it. That was the program Snoop meeting with him. But, you know, for somebody like that, for John, you would, you know, you'd walk over hot coals for him because he was just brilliant at it. And I had a great time with John at Great North Radio, and then it became Magic, and there we are. We moved on again, doing the morning show with somebody called Anna. John and Anna in the morning, and then we transferred down to TFM.
Just before we get on to Magic, did you manage to do any shows on Metro?
I did 10 shows on Metro, evening shows, in for Wayne, before Alan Robson and the Night Owls. And
wow, yeah.
I hadn't got absolute bastard clue what I was doing at all. Because I'd been doing AM radio, and all of a sudden I was playing these, you know, it was hits, not homework type stuff. I had no clue who anybody was, what I was doing or anything. Tony McKenzie, oh, we need somebody to do this show. Can you do it for me? I said, yeah, it's extra money. Yeah, I'll do it, Tony. And I think he regretted it literally 5 minutes in. But I decided to do the 2 weeks. But yeah, I can say I was on Metro, 97.1 Metro.
All right, let's talk about Magic. So you're there during the transition from Great North Radio to Magic. I mean, everyone's talking about how, you know, rebrands are going off left, right, and centre now. But what was it like back then? Was everybody equally as nervous as they are today?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was basically a good team. They'd split GNR off, so the guys who were on GNR stayed on Magic North 1152, and then they got a new team in on the 1170 in the Stockton area. So basically, it was still the same station, but just with a different name on the door. And everybody was great about it. You know, people like Dave Bray, who's recently passed away, he was on that station, and Dave was just brilliant. He used to spend the afternoon in the pub and then turn up at the radio station. And the first time I met him, Dave had really long hair, and the door opened, and he sort of like looked at me in the door. He went, "You're John," you know, like through this not drunken haze, but he'd had a couple of drinks. I said, "Yeah, Dave," and he went, "Okay, great. I'll be back in a minute." And he went off to the bog and ran his head under the cold water tap, I was told, for 5 minutes. And I buzzed Lee and Ingrid, and I said, "Is that Dave?" He went, "Yeah." He said, he's had a drink. He said, "I'll be fine. Don't worry about it." And no word of a lie. He came down, sat down. He went, "Independent Radio News." And he went, "Good evening. You're with Magic 1152. I'm Dave Bray. We've got the weather next after this from the Eagles." And I was like, "What? How do you do that, Dave?" And he just pulled out like 30 pounds in £1 coins and said, "I've had a bit of a sweep on the one-arm band." And just crashed these pound coins down on the desk. But he was word perfect. Not only was he word perfect, he was diction perfect as well. And what a voice that guy had. And a lovely, lovely bloke. Absolutely lovely bloke. But the radio station was great. And we really enjoyed it. Tony Horn was opposite on FM. Yeah. And Tony built that program up to be huge. But it used to rankle us a little bit because, you know, if you're on an AM and an FM, you sometimes talk to the guys opposite and you say, "Oh, here's a good line. Have you seen this in the paper today? Oh, what about this? Why don't you say that? I'm going to say this in a minute." And I remember once I told Tony a line and he used it on the air, and the sales team, somebody from the sales team came in. I went, "Oh, you're all right. Good morning." I was passed to the corridor. "I've got to go see Tony. He's just done the funniest line ever." I thought, "You bastard, that was mine." I did that. So you were up against those sort of like little argy-bargies every now and again.
You mentioned doing breakfast with a lady called Anna.
Yeah.
Is that the Anna?
It depends what you mean by the Anna. It's not the Anna that I'm married to. It's
right. Okay.
It's a different Anna who's now on Radio Newcastle, who is also called Anna Foster.
That's confusing.
Oh well, when I married my Anna, that Anna was my best man.
Oh really?
Yeah. So there you go. No, she used to do the travel news, and I thought, she's got something. She's really good. And this was back in the Sundays. And then John O'Hara said, I want to put a co-presenter with you. Is there anybody you can think of? Rather than, the old forced, let's put two people together and hope that they gel.
Yeah.
He said, if you got anybody in mind, who do you think? And I said, well, there's this person called Anna. And we got her in, and she was brilliant. She's absolutely fantastic from day one. And we worked together down at TFM and then went our separate ways. And she's on Radio Newcastle. And of course, she was on Metro. And then she went on to Magic, and then she made the move to the BBC.
So from Great North Radio or Magic 1152, you go back to TFM in 1998.
Yes. I mean, all the time that I'd been away from TFM and all these other stations, you put the feelers out, you send the tape out, this is where I am. And I got a letter back basically saying, bugger off from TFM. No way on God's earth are you going to work here. Bugger off. Leave it alone. Stop sending us stuff. It was that sort of letter. Fair enough. And then one day I came off the air at Magic and the phone rang. And it was the MD at TFM. And saying, can we have a chat with you? Can you meet us at this pub in Stockton? And I came off the air at 10 o'clock, and I think I was there for 10:15, down the A1. And I met, and Sally said, we'd like you to do the breakfast show at TFM. And I just said yes. And I remember saying, don't you want to talk money, contract? I said, no, yes, I'll do it, yes. That's it. You remember like the Chris Evans when he said he was going to do radio and he just said yes and then went to the toilet. It's that sort of moment. I think every presenter has that sort of moment when the dream job is landed on them. And I just said, yeah, I want to do it. And I spoke to the PD at Metro, Sean Marley, and he said, yeah, obviously I know about this. And he said, are you taking Anna with you? And I said, can I? And he went, yeah, absolutely. So we went down as a pair. And we were John and Anna in the morning, the serial thrillers. Yes, look at that. What? Took them all of 5 seconds to think of that one, didn't they? But again, there's my hometown station, like you on Viking, and here I am doing the biggest show on the station. The audience figure was brilliant. We were in 70-odd thousand in the half hours, and everybody was listening, and things you used to do, you'd get a reaction from if you were out and about, and doing Party in the Park to what the police claim over the course of the day, 120,000 people passed through. There was at any one time 70,000 people there on the stage. We did the radio program on the TV, on the local cable channel, NTL, Technology Tamed. God, I can still remember the bloody straplines. God, this is sad. So we had all the cameras in the studio and we were playing the videos in for the songs and talking to the cameras as well as being on the radio. So all of that was just like, God, I've died and gone to heaven here.
Whose idea was it to do that? Because that was long before Evans did it on Virgin.
It was. It's just that the local Comcast channel, which had been rebranded to NTL, used to show Middlesbrough Football Club TV. And they sponsored the breakfast show. And they said, well, as part of the sponsorship, can we do the radio program and put it out on the TV, on the local cable channel? And we did for about an hour, 90 minutes a morning. So about 7:30 through until 9. We turned the cameras on and hello, here we are in your front room. And, I can see you. And all of that. So that was really, really good. And it was a good little marketing ploy and technique. We got a lot of mileage out of it. It was hard work because, I'd be going to press something on Dallet and then think, oh no, bollocks, I've got this great big video machine that I need to press play on now. And all of that. But it was really good. And doing TFM, you did all the big events, on stage, the big light switch-ons, the firework displays, all of that sort of stuff. So it was just brilliant. And I had a car with my name on the side, so it was great.
You got it. You got it. I was waiting for it.
Well,
what was it?
Well, it was a Ford Focus, because the Ford Focus had just come out But I also had a sponsored car at Sun City, which was a Rover 100, which wasn't central locking. They'd rebadged it, you fool, and it was windy up windows. So I had John Foster Sun City drives Rover 100 from Warwick Garage in Sunderland, and then John Foster TFM drives Focus from Jennings Ford Stockton.
I don't know if you're aware of the Dave Shearer car story, which is the most
Go on.
It's pointless me asking. Have you not heard the Dave Shearer car story?
Go on. No, tell me. Enlighten me.
Well, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to allow him to tell that story.
Oh, is he coming on?
Hopefully so. Yeah, but there's no point me asking any guests anymore about their sponsored car stories because his sponsored car story, is the best. So I'll leave that one as a tease, John. I'll leave that as a tease.
Okay, it's teased. It's teased.
No, it's when I was reading earlier on about your career, were you known as the Boomerang? Because you seem to kind of come back round again. So you go back to TFM and then you go back to Magic 1152.
I did, because I was sacked from TFM. So there you go. I had.
How come you were sacked?
I was a few months away from my contract. The Ray Jars had just come out. This is when, and okay, the show you can turn around and say the show was crap. You deserve to go. Okay, let's put it into a bit of context here. The show was still good. I was still enjoying it. Probably not as much as I was, but it was still good. Capital had come in and taken over Century, and were relaunching it, along this more male football orientated skew. And they were throwing money at the Three Legends and money at Goffey in the morning. Goffey was on nearly every single bus back and bloody poster site in the area, and we were on 7 minibus backs in Darlington. So, you can't really compete against things like that. And we lost market leader by about 1,000. And something had to change. It came from on high at EMAP. It would be then that something had to change, and I was the one nearest the contract. So I finished on the air at 10 o'clock, and I said, I'm going. And the program secretary was in the office, and I remember saying, could you just go and see David in the office, PD, for 5 minutes? And I thought, oh, here we go. And I walked into his office, and he had a face like physic, and he just said, that's it. He said, you're done. Don't take all your stuff now. Come back for it later, but you've just done your last show. Can you leave your key at reception on the way out? And that was it. I was gone. Within 9 minutes I'd left. And walking down the corridor, and everybody, see you tomorrow, John. I was like, you won't. And then later on in the afternoon, when the announcement was being made, phone started to ring from everybody at TFM. What's up? And then other people from other stations ring up. What's happened? Is there anything we can do to help? We will. You bollocks. You just want to know what the gossip is, don't you? That's what you want. You want to know the gossip. And then Tony McKenzie rang and said, I've got a vacancy here on 1152 Magic. Come back here. You can do breakfast. So I went back up there because I didn't. And, you had one or two other offers, but for various reasons, I could have gone and worked somewhere else in the country on an FM, but my roots were in the Northeast. And it just seemed like a quick fix, and I knew what I was doing. But I'd walked back into Magic that had changed from the Magic I'd left, because this Magic had become Magic the Big Easy. Here are the Eagles now, and another 4 songs back to back. That's all you had to say. And I'd come from TFM, all hits all day, today's favourite music. My God, £10,000 is coming up in 10 minutes' time after this. Magic the Big Easy. So I hated it. I absolutely hated it for the 18 months I was there. And only really start to like it when I was leaving. And I used to get in literally 2 minutes to 6. Brian Moore, who's sadly just left us recently, as we record this podcast, he was on breakfast at Metro. And I used to walk in at 2 minutes to 6. And he used to say to me, he said, I'll never get over how you time it, that you just pull up and walk in. He said, it's not like you're sitting in the car for 5 minutes because we're looking at you on the camera. How do you do it? It's a gift. It's a gift. And then as soon as I'd hit the ad break for 10 o'clock, I was out the door and listening in the car, going on the Western Bypass to make sure that Richard Skinner picked up, because it was like 6 minutes and I'd gone. I'd left the building at 4 minutes to 10 because I really just was not interested in it at all. I hated it.
I had a period in my career where I was like that, and it's soul destroying, isn't it? Because you've worked so hard to get on air, and then suddenly the love has gone, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been kicked out of you. one of the things that sort of like brought it home to me is, you remember back in the day when you go and buy something at the shop, petrol, for instance, and it's before the days of contactless, and you have to put your card and put it into that contraption and then did like a wipe of it with photostat paper, and then you'd have to sign your name.
Yeah.
You hand your card over, and this woman who was at the petrol station went, "Hey, John Foster, didn't you used to be that guy on the radio?" I thought, well, I still am. And I felt ashamed. For about 6 months after I got fired from TFM, I felt ashamed. And probably, don't want to put too much of a downer on this, John. I probably was close to a nervous breakdown because everything that I'd worked for, as you said, had just been taken away. And I almost felt like it was my fault. And I went into hiding. I remember sitting with the curtains closed in the house because I didn't want anybody to look in. Not that everybody was walking past and making a beeline for my house. But in my head, I just thought, God, I failed. This is dreadful. And I went to Magic, and like I say, I hated it. But then I got in touch with Giles Squire, who was at Century. And Giles said, look, there's no jobs here. He said, but you and I have crossed paths a couple of times. Come on in. Let's have a chat. So I went across to Century, and I spent an afternoon with Giles Squire. And believe me, that was an education in one afternoon about the entire radio industry. And if it hadn't have been for Giles, I think I might have quit. But he talked me around, told me all about the industry, the ins and outs, nuts and bolts, why it works. If you let go of it, it's not because you're rubbish, it's because they're doing something different, and it's a purely business decision. It's not personal. You might think it at the time, but it's a business decision. And he sort of like put me back on the track. And then I started getting a bit of freelance work at the BBC, and genuinely, that period at Magic, that's when I started to enjoy it. And when I really started to enjoy it is when I handed my notice in to Mackenzie. And he just looked and said, what's this? I said, I'm leaving. I'm resigning. It's my month's notice, Tony. I'm going. Where the bloody hell are you going? And I just said, I'm away. I've had enough. Thanks. And that was it. Gone.
And then he started crying there, John. That was so emotional.
Magic of radio.
Yeah. A lot of people have talked about that Giles. I mean, he was a character as well, wasn't he?
I mean, what Giles did at Metro, I mean, you cannot, put it into words, how that station suddenly in the 80s just dragged itself up from nowhere. It'd always be, I mean, its first few years were very, very rocky, but then all of a sudden, bang, there it was. And then 1986 is when it changed completely, and it just became this monster in the Northeast. And you look at the name of the talent that's passed through that door, it's quite unbelievable. And it was all down to Giles, doing the talent spotting, driving to various parts of the country and just sitting, listening to the radio and going, that person's good. Right, we'll make a note of them. We've got a tape of them. And that's how he did it. And a great team around him. An absolutely phenomenal team around him. Coleman, Mark Forrest, Russ Williams, Tim Smith, David Prever. All of these people's names, Clive Warren, Nicky Brown. Amazing, amazing lineup. And it was all down to Giles and his foresight about the industry and what could happen and what was going to happen. I know people in the South talk about Richard Park, and I would say that Giles Squire is equally up there, for what he did in the Northeast, if you want, of the country.
Whilst we're talking about Northeast and memorable management, did you ever cross paths with John Myers?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. I approached, not in a work type way. I type scenario. All right, great. I sent the odd tape when Century launched because I knew Simo, John Simons, better because I listened to Simo when I was going to school, and he was the PD and John was the MD and everything like that. And I'd been for a couple of times for a job at Century, and it hadn't happened. But subsequently, I got to know John a little bit, and he always used to greet you with, legend. And you think, yeah, but you say that to everybody, John. I know these things. You're just making me feel good, but you say that to everybody. So I never worked for the guy. I got close to working for Simo once when they started Smooth, and I'd been at the BBC and, been a bit fed up, and they were starting Smooth in the Northeast, and I got in touch with John, and I had a meeting with him, and I had a meeting with Kevin Howard, the PD, and then I had another meeting with John, and I thought it was going really well, and they were saying all the right things, and then Simo just said, "Sir, if I can ask you what your salary expectation would be." And I said, well, John, I said, I'll be coming up to the Northeast. I'm leaving a staff job at the BBC. I couldn't do it for any less than X. To which point, John had this great big booklet open about me. He just slammed it shut and he went, "So, have you been on your holidays yet this year? And I thought, oh, fuck, I've blown that one then, haven't I? And that was it. And I spoke to Simo recently about it, and he said, yeah, he said, you were on the books, but no, not at that price. Couldn't go at that price. So I sold myself short, but I'd never forget it. It's just the way he slapped the book shut and he went, so, in your holidays yet? I thought, bollocks.
All right, let's talk about how the boomerang swings round in action again, because the next station on your CV is BBC Radio Cleveland. You return there and you spend a considerable amount of time there, John.
15 years. Yeah. 15 years. I know. It was. I mean, that was the place where I started, and then I was going back, the old conquering hero. They knew about my history in the area and hosting the biggest show on TFM. So what did they do when they hired me? They put me on early breakfast. Yeah. In typical BBC type way.
Yeah, very BBC.
Yeah, early breakfast for 6 months to see if I would shape up. But I remember going back there, and I'd put a box of cards in a cupboard in the studio, and I'd gaffed the box up in a certain way. And when I went back there, like 10 years later, the box was still there.
Was it?
Yeah. And on Thursday mornings, after I'd finished the show and done the bit for breakfast, I had to record The Gardeners. And I thought, Christ, I was doing this in 1988. And I said to the producer, I said, The Gardeners? He said, yes, it's these two. I said, I used to record these in 1988. Why are they still on? Doing this same spot 10 years, 15 years later? I said, well, we've always done it. And that seemed to be the answer to everything at the BBC. Well, we've always done it that way. We've always done it. So, we just carry on doing it. And you think, God, Bennett, surely it's got to have, the wheel has got to have turned a tiny bit. So I, rightly or wrongly, made it my mission to try and get that wheel turned a little bit and just try and influence what I'd picked up in my career onto the team there a little bit. And, it's like anything. The BBC is this huge, great big ship that's impossible to turn around. But every now and again, you can just nudge it a tiny bit. And we did that a little bit.
When you went to the BBC, I always ask my guests who transitioned from commercial to the BBC, how did you find it? Because for me, I was like, Jesus, this is a different world.
Yeah. Oh, God, absolutely. Going on and doing like I was predominantly afternoons. I did a stint on mids and I did a stint on breakfast, but predominantly I was afternoons. I remember going on the air and thinking, okay, 4 minutes of news, I've got a disc, then I've got this, and I've got ads. And oh, shit, I don't have ads now, do I? Oh, bollocks. Right, okay. Yeah. So that's 12, 14 minutes out the hour where I now have to worry about something. And I found that hard. And, just like some of the things that we used to have to talk about and do the what's-ons. And it was like, the Cleveland Retired Men's Association are meeting at this. But actually, to go, you have to be a member of the Cleveland Retired Men's Association, so they would know that the meeting was on. Why are we telling everybody else in the area? And again, anybody who's got anything wrong with them in terms of like disease or anything like that are going through a really tough time. It's awful. But, in a what's on, the Cleveland Bowel Cancer team are giving a talk to the Cleveland Bowel Cancer Organization. It's like, and then all of a sudden you're talking about a village fete. Things don't sit nicely with each other, do they? And you think that shouldn't be a what's on. That's not a what's on. Please take it out. We're playing Buddy Holly. Hang on a sec. We're playing Buddy Holly. So anybody who bought that record has got to be at least 80 now. Why are we not playing songs in the 70s and the 80s? And this is going back to just after the millennium change. Why are we not because we've always played Buddy Holly. And it's just like, no, we need to move it up. We need to move it forward. No, we can't do that. Well, as Alex Lester would say, Radio Grim Reaper's going to come for them any time now. And, it's going to fall off a cliff. So there's little things like that we had to try and just move it forward and tell them, this is the reasoning why. And it goes back to commercial radio. You might not agree with what you're being told to do, but you can understand the reason why you've been asked to do it. Because it's all very carefully thought out and programmed. And even if you don't want to talk like that, you have to because it's part of the bigger plan. But the BBC, it's just like, don't the mic, do what the hell you like.
I think we should mention your awards, John, that you got.
Oh, aye. Runner-up EMAP Radio Awards, Best Breakfast, JK and Joel, who were at Viking beat us, and bronze Sonys, and a silver Sony as well. for various things at the BBC. I mean, don't get me wrong, the BBC was amazing once you fell into the groove. But I hope I didn't become institutionalized by it. I hope that there was still a commercial me fighting it a little bit just to try and pull it forward, because like anything, wherever you work, John, you just always want it to be the best. You know, if you have a love of a medium of radio and you're passionate about it, wherever you go, you want it to succeed. And I remember when I left Magic, I was told, oh, you'll die at the BBC, Sync Without Trace. So we won awards, which was great. And I always remember there was a radar that came out when I was at the BBC, and Peter Grant, who used to be at Hallam and TFM, he was on Magic, and I rang Granty up. And I said, radar today, Pete? And he went, yeah. I said, are you having your meeting normal time, 10 o'clock in the boardroom at TFM? He said, yeah. I said, let us know. And he went, okay. Because Radio Cleveland had actually gone above TFM in share. Not in reach, but our hours had become good, and we'd just gone above them in share. And at TFM, what they used to do was run through the figures, and then used to do the league table in terms of share at the end. And Pete came on. He said, "Yeah, figures are okay like this." And he said, "You've had a good one there." I said, "I know." I said, "Did they do the league table at the end, Pete?" And he went, "No, they didn't." I said, "No, we're ahead of you now," and they wouldn't want to put that on the board, would they? So just like little bits of justification for me going to the BBC, like the awards, like going ahead of them in market share. It didn't last, but we proved a point.
Why did you leave the BBC then, John?
I left the BBC because I moved house. Really, I probably might be able to make you cry here if I try hard enough as well. So I'm married to Anna, and Anna works at the BBC. We just have our first child. Anna gets a phone call. She's offered 5 Live Drive, which she does for nearly a decade with Tony Livesey. Was Peter Allen first and Tony. And so we looked for a house, and we found this house where we are now in Halifax in the Calder Valley, where they film Happy Valley and Gentleman Jack and all that sort of stuff. And it's 100 miles to Middlesbrough and 100 miles back home. So I was doing 200 miles a day. And I'd done a stint on mid-morning. I was really, really enjoying that. And then I was told that the guy who I was depping for a mid-morning, he'd taken like a career break. He was coming back, and I was going to afternoons. And I said, I can't go back to afternoons. I said, I've done that show for like 7 years now. I said, I think I've done everything I can do with it. I'm worn with it. I need a new challenge. And they said, well, there you go. And I thought, that's it, is it? And in the car coming home, Anna rang me up and she said, how'd it go? And I said, well, I don't know, I might have to stick it out a bit longer. And she said, superhero day at school today for the little one. I said, all right. So who did he go for in the end? Because my head was just in this going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home. And I wasn't paying any attention to anything. And I said, who did he go as? Which superhero? And she said, well, you put a check shirt on. You got one of your old lanyards. You got one of those little microphones. Got an old pair of your glasses, kicked the lenses out, and he went as you. He said, because you're his hero.
Oh, John.
And then, and you just think, bollocks, I can't do this anymore. That's it, I'm out. So I just quit. I went away on the sick, and then I just handed my notice in. And the boss was very supportive of everything, and he turned around when I handed my notice in, and he said, I thought you were coming back. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm done. I've had enough of this now. I can't do this anymore. I have to be at home for the kids. I can't be 200 miles a day with the anxiety of trying to navigate the M62 nearly to the Greater Manchester border in rush hour. I said, I can't do it anymore. And I thought it was a sad way to go because I'd put everything into that job. I'd put everything into it, and I wanted it to work so much. And I never dropped the ball for them. And whenever there was anything big that was happening, it was me who was on the air. I was asked to do it. There was a guy, the football commentator, Alistair Brownlee, hugely well known in the Teesside area. He passed away after a very short illness. And I mean, everybody turned out for Alistair's funeral. It was something to behold. But when the news broke that he died, it was me. And I'd known Ali since 1987. And I had to take 4 hours on the air. And I said to the boss at the time, I said, what do I do? What do you want me to do? I can't do the show that we had planned. What do you want me to do? And he just looked at me and he said, I don't know, whatever you feel's right. And that was it. And we did probably one of the best shows we'd ever done that afternoon, because we literally was feeling exactly the same as all of the people listening. You know, when it was the big election things, it was me doing it. When the steelworks closed down, I was on the air doing it. And I thought, I haven't dropped a ball for you, but somehow I feel like you're just not interested in me. So I'm going, I'm out, I'm off, I'm done. And then subsequently I went back and did a bit of depping there. And that was quite nice, because I felt like I'd closed the circle a little bit, because I never said goodbye. And on that last program I did before I went away for a while, I played the Bluebells' Young at Heart as my last song. And I've got to tell you, John, I fucking detest that song with a passion. And I always have. And I remember looking at the clock and looking at the bloody play-out system and thinking, shit, it's going to be the Bluebells. That and Come On Eileen, anything but. Or the Mavericks, Dance the Night Away. And in the end, I ended up playing it. And I just thought, well, that obviously is saying something to me. But then subsequently I went back and did a bit of depping, and it was nice to wander in and, hello, how are you? Oh, what's going on? Great, yeah, bye. That's it. I've gone. I don't need to think about it now. I'll come back tomorrow. You serve it up. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. But I'm, you know, as far as me getting involved and being interested, you know, as I would be if I was doing a normal show, that's not happening, because as soon as I leave here, I leave it at the door. And that's what happened.
You then go on to do, as you mentioned, freelancing work in Leeds, Sheffield, York, Lancashire, Merseyside, Tees. There's one thing I did want to talk about. You did in 2017, and we're going back in time slightly, but I just wanted to find out your experience on this when you did Up All Night on 5 Live. How did you find that?
For an Anorak, amazing. Absolutely amazing. To sit there on 5 Live and say, you know, 693 909 across the BBC local network, da-da-da-da-da. This is 5 Live, Up All Night. I'm John Foster in for Rod Sharp. Coming up. And that was great. And doing the Dr. Carl phone in at 3:30 in the morning and seeing just the switchboard and the text going nuts for this guy, Dr. Carl, Australian. Ask him anything you want, he'll tell you the answer. Amazing. Doing a relationship phone in at 2:30 and being told that we're not expecting, you know, big things about this. Let's just see how we do with it. And then getting a full switchboard and being told, yeah, it was really good. How did you do that? Oh, you know, I don't know, but it worked. But from a technical point of view, to be sat next door and the SM ring, hello, London Control Room. Yes, this is S6 at Salford. We're taking control of the network. Thank you. I was thinking, wow, this is brilliant. You know, because you just have this vision of crusty old engineers in broadcasting house with, you know, plugs and, you know, patch bays and clicking things in. That's okay, here we go. Portland Place here calling. I just thought it was amazing. Absolutely brilliant.
Can you tell me about UK Radio Perth, Australia as well? How did that all come about?
There's a guy called Jonathan Morell, who's at Radio Cumbria now, and Jonathan was on Radio Newcastle, he was on Metro, he was on the TV as well for a lot of years, and he had a radio station in Perth, Australia. And during the lockdown, I mean, he's in this country, but he has family out there, and during the lockdown, when everybody was not allowed to go anywhere and bored, and I just said to him, Jonathan, how's things, da-di-da-di-da? And he said, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm just bored. There's nothing to do. Work as a freelancer is, dried up and pretty much, so yeah, a bit bored. And then he rang me back and he said, you want to do a show on the radio? I said, yeah, okay. So I used to do UK radio aimed at all the expats in Perth, Western Australia from the garage, which was nuts. And it was all voice tracked, obviously, station playlist, but used to come in here round about 8 o'clock in the evening to do breakfast on UK radio, 6 o'clock their time. So time difference, get it all into station playlist. And I did that for about just over 12 months, 14 months, something like that. Crazy. And that was a hoot. That was a hoot because, the expat audience is great, and you say to them, if you go to this store in Yanchep or wherever it is, and they've got Heinz tomato soup in there. All the expats shoot down to this shop, and you look at the shop next day on Facebook, and it's like, we've now sold out. It's like, whoa! So there you go, from giving away £10,000 on the radio to tins of tomato soup in Australia.
And tell me, what are you doing now then, John? So you're doing the voiceover work, podcasting, lecturing, the lot? I
do a bit of lecturing for universities, a bit of voice training, a bit about, the industry. I do the odd voiceover. I'm not the sort of voiceover that's open bank holiday Monday a family-run business with over 40 years' experience.
You're good at it, John. You're good at it.
Okay. Free car parking and face painting for the kids. Sale now on. I don't tend to do those. I tend to do lots of voiceovers for like firms, engineering firms, and extolling the virtues of how this machine works to get this from that and all the other. And that's nice. And I'm on a couple of ads, and people get random messages, is that you on the Indeed advert? Indeed it is. Indeed I do. So, there's little things like that keep me ticking over, and Middlesbrough Football Club as well.
Let's talk about that just very briefly. So you are the stadium announcer at Sunderland. You
Yes.
now are the stadium announcer at Middlesbrough.
Yep.
Am I right in thinking that those two teams hate each other?
They're not keen on each other, but, Middlesbrough is the hometown. Sunderland is somewhere where I worked. Sunderland Football Club is a brilliant institution. There's some fantastic people who work there. I really enjoyed my time there. Gave it up when we moved down here. Never thought I'd be doing it again. One day I get a phone call from the borough. Can you come and do the PA? Oh, okay. Can you come back next week? Yeah, okay. And then it's continued. Hopefully it might continue for a while. Who knows? But it's been 4 years now. And obviously we've had the lockdown there. And it's been okay. It's been okay. It's really nice to see a lot of old faces, that I know work behind the scenes at the club, and, bumping into people who are fans who I know as well. So that's pretty nice thing to do. And it's not a bad gig, You think about it, football announcers, there's a captive audience of 30,000 people there listening to you. So, that's sometimes better than a big Radar diary sometimes. When it's going well. If it's not going well, what are you doing? Get off, not interested. Bugger off. But there you go. So, yeah, and predominantly I look after the kids. My main role has been being a dad to the two little ones, which I thoroughly enjoy, You're
a superhero, so of course.
Well, if you'd said to me 10 years ago, while I was still in the thrust of a daily show, your life will be going to the supermarket and picking the kids up and talking to the other mums and dads in the playground and, doing the washing and the ironing. I was right off. But you know what? I absolutely love it. Do I miss the radio? Yeah, of course I miss the radio. Do I want to do it again? I'd love to do it again. But somebody once said to me, there's no point knocking on a door if it's shut. So don't waste your energies. They know where you are. If they want you, they'll come and get you. Or if you hear about an opening, go for it. But only if it's right for you. And going back to somebody like John Myers, I think this is that quote from Myers is, don't work for anybody you don't respect. And as you get older, that rings more true. Certainly with me, it does. And I look around the industry, and there's not that many people that I would like to work for, and I'm a bit long in the tooth for a few people, I think. I'm 52, coming up 53, so I don't look it. There's only a handful of people, and those people appeared at the latter end of the radio career when I went and did some bits and pieces at Smooth. So, people like your Jamie Griffiths at Smooth in the Northwest, Dick Stone, who I got in touch with when I left the BBC. Hello, mate. Yeah, give us a call. Come down. And I ended up doing Smooth in the West in the East Midlands, with Ian Brannan doing the shows either side. So I was in Birmingham on the Saturday, and he was in Nottingham on the Saturday, and then we swapped over on the Sunday. So we used to meet each other at Tamworth Services for a coffee, where all great DJs meet.
Yes.
I really enjoyed doing Smooth. I thought Smooth was just a wonderful, and is a wonderful station. It's just this giant that just defies the odds. Just incredible. But people like that and doing podcasts for Paul Emmons and various other people, I think it's just great. I really enjoyed doing that. And when I left the BBC, John Simons rang me up, Simo, and he said, you know what? He said, you'll look back 6 months' time, this will be the best thing that you've ever done. And he was absolutely right.
What's been your highlight in your radio career then, John?
The MP for Stockton North farting on the air while I was interviewing him, to the point where you could actually hear it on the air. I was sat like that listening to it, and all of a sudden he said, and I think like that. And I went, he's farted. He spun the tape back. That's a highlight. I don't know. If I look back on the career, did I enjoy it? Yes. Are there things I would have done differently? Absolutely. Are there things I'm not proud of what I did. Yeah, in today's things, you look back and quite a bit of what happened back in the 90s was, a little bit off piece to what would happen now today, so you would change that. Highlights, doing the breakfast show on TFM, it's got to be because that's the station I wanted to work at. Working in Dovecot Street, absolutely. Taking national radio off, absolutely. Interviewing some of my heroes that I only got the chance to do at the BBC, absolutely. When you find out that Roger Moore's in Broadcasting House in London, and you say to the Nicola, who I worked with in the afternoon, who was like the producer, get Roger Moore on. Go on, see if you can do it. Challenge you. 10 minutes later, he said, yeah, he's coming on in 5 minutes' time. What? Have you done that? Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, special guest on the show. It's only 007 himself. Sir Roger Moore joins us from London. Hello there, John. And it's like, So things like that. But then I think for myself, proving to myself I could still do it by going to work at various other stations after the BBC. And yeah, there were other BBC local stations. Always wanted to work in Liverpool. Always desperately wanted to be on the air in Liverpool. So tick that off when I worked at Radio Merseyside for a very short stint. Wanted to prove to me I could still do it in the commercial world. So when I did Smooth, that was a nice way of finishing off. I mean, Crikey Moses is one of the biggest stations in the country. So yeah, I've had a pretty good time, I think. And now I just sit here and play jingles to myself.
John, it has been absolutely wonderful having you on Crunch and Roll. So thank you very much for your time.
You're only saying that. I know you're only saying that. It'll be edited down to about 5 minutes this now. I know it will be.
It won't. I promise you. I always ask my guests, who would you like to hear have their own episode of Crunch and Roll?
Simo.
Yeah.
John Simons, I think. I would love to hear from Clive Warren. Chris Johnson. And who else? There'll be one or two others. Paul Fear and Richard Allinson, because I think they are probably, for their technique and how they put together a show, I think they're probably at the very top of their game in terms of that style of radio. And the obvious one, I think, would be Moyles, because I think, like him, or if you don't like the act, the guy on the radio is a genius. He's an absolute genius. And I remember crossing paths with him in the early days when he was on Pulse and I was on Great Yorkshire Gold. He always knew it was me on Great Yorkshire Gold by the first jingle I played out the news, because it was the same one every night. And we used to keep in touch, but you always knew Chris was going to be a big star. And he turned out to be one of the biggest stars in the country. Brilliant. So yeah, Moyles.
Oh, yeah.
John, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for squeezing in with your busy schedule. We really appreciate it. Would you please do us the honours of reading us out with the end credits?
You have been listening to Crunch and Roll with me, John Foster. Subscribe on your favourite podcast app to get every new episode as soon as they drop. Crunch and Roll is a 969 media production presented by John Fox and produced by Simon Borzowski. Open Bank Holiday Monday.
Oh, yeah.